This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
The Honorable, the President.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we willingly acknowledge you as the supreme being, most gracious and most merciful. Look down, we beseech you, on us who are members of this Senate, and deign to assist us in the duties that we have to perform on behalf of our beloved country of Trinidad and Tobago. Open our eyes to see the truth and help us to accept it with all its implications into our lives. Direct us, O Lord, in our deliberations, so that setting aside private interests, unwholesome prejudices, and personal affections, we may treat all matters set before us with honesty, courage, and conviction. Through all we say and do in this Senate, may we give glory and honor to your holy name, inspire confidence in our fellow citizens, and make a positive contribution to the peace and prosperity of our nation. Amen.
Or affirmation announcements by the President.
Honorable Senators, I have granted leave of absence to Senator Wade Mark and to Senator David Small, both of whom are out of the country. Honorable Senators, I have received the following correspondence from His Excellency the President Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, ORTTSC. To Miss the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago by His Excellency Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, ORTTSC, President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. To Ms. Raquel Ghani, whereas Senator Mark is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago. And now, therefore, I, Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(b) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Raquel Ghani, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 28th of November 2017 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of the said Senator Wade Mark, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's this 28th day of November 2017. To Mr. Albert William Sidney, whereas Senator David Small is incapable of performing his duties as a senator by reason of his absence from Trinidad and Tobago. Now, therefore, I, Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, President as aforesaid, in exercise of the power vested in me by Section 44(1)(a) and Section 44(4)(c) of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby appoint you, Albert William Sidney, to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 28th of November 2017 and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of the said Senator David Small, given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President St. Anne's this 20th day of November 2017. Honorable Senators, Senators are required to take the oath.
I, Raquel Ghani, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty Allah that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
I, Albert Sidney, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago upon which I am about to enter.
Honorable Senators, I am awaiting two further instruments from the Office of the President. So with your leave, we will come back to this item on the order paper a little later in the proceedings. Honorable Senators, I wish to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Ma Pei-kwa, Vice Chairman of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference of the People's Republic of China and his delegation. We welcome you to our Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Honorable Senators, I also wish to recognize His Excellency Song Yumin, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives, the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Bill 2017 in the name of the Attorney General.
Attorney General.
President, in accordance with Standing Order 62(1)B, I beg to move that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the proceedings.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the bill be taken later in the proceedings. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The next stage of the bill will be taken later in the proceedings.
Petitions, papers.
Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name and in the name of the Minister of National Security. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session, 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the system of inventory control with the public service. The ministerial response of the Ministry of National Security to the third report of the Joint Select Committee on National Security, second session, 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the operations of the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center and the issue of DNA sampling in Trinidad and Tobago. The ministerial response of the Ministry of National Security to the fourth report of the Joint Select Committee on National Security, second session, 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into prison security and the status of the investigation into the Port of Spain prison break of July 24, 2015. The annual report of the operations of the Interception of Communications Act, Chapter 1508, for the period January 2012 to December 2012. And finally, Madam President, the response of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session, 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. Madam President.
Minister of Rural Development and Local Government.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session, 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the system of inventory control with the public service. The annual administrative report and audited financial statement of Palaseco Agricultural Enterprises Limited for the years 2012 to 2013 and 2013 to 2014. The annual administrative reports of the Point Fortin Borough Corporation for the fiscal years 2012 to 2013 and 2013 to 2014. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to the fourth report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session, 2016 to 2017. 11th Parliament, on the examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Thank you.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Madam President, I have the honour to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Trade and Industry to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, an examination of the system of inventory control with the public service. The annual administrative report of the National Flour Mills Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2016. The annual administrative reports of the Betting Levy Board for the years July 1st to 2014 to June 30th, 2015, and July 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2016. The annual administrative report of the Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company Limited, ETEC, for the year ended September 30th, 2016. Thank you.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Works and Transport to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, second session, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Works and Transport to the fourth report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, second session, 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. I thank you.
Vice President.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The response of the Public Service Appeal Board to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. The response of the Auditor General's Department to the third report of the Public Administrations and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. The response of the Integrity Commission to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the system of inventory control with the public service. The annual report of the Teaching Service Commission for the fiscal year 2013. The annual administrative report of the Statutory Authority Service Commission for the year ended September 2016. The eighth report of the Judicial and Legal Service Commission for the years 2008 to 2016. The response of the Office of the President to the second report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the current expenditure and internal controls. The response of the Integrity Commission to the fourth report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on examination of the system of internal audit within the public service.
Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The administrative report of the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee for the period March 2015 to September 2015. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. The annual administrative report of the National Entrepreneurship Development Company Limited, also known as NETCO, for the period October 2014 to September 2015. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development to the first report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, second session 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the current level of violence among students in schools with particular focus on physical and cyberbullying. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, 2nd session 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination of the system of inventory control within the public service, and the response of the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee, 2nd session 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Thank you, Madam President.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in the name of the Minister of Finance. The annual administrative reports of Caribbean Airlines Limited for the years ended 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. The annual report of the National Enterprises Limited for the financial year ended March 31st, 2017. The annual audited financial statements of Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited for the financial year ended September 30, 2016. The consolidated financial statements of Trinidad and Tobago Creative Industries Company Limited, Creative TT, for the financial year ended September 30, 2015. The annual administrative reports of the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Business Development Limited for the years ended December 31st, 2013, 2014, and 2015. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Committees for the 9 months ended September 30, 1998. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Mayor's Fund of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2013. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, Children Authority Fund for the years ended September 30, 2014 to September 30, 2015. The annual audited financial statements of Caroni 1975 Limited for the financial year ended June 30, 2017. The audited financial statements of the Deposit Insurance Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2016. The consolidated financial statements of Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the year ended September 30, 2016. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Point Fortin Civic Center for the year ended September 30, 2006. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Port of Spain Corporation for the year ended September 30, 2009 and 2010. The report of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to the progress of the proposals to restructure CLICO, BAT, and CIB for the quarter ended March 31, 2017, and the quarter ended June 30, 2017. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 8th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee for the 2nd session, 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on the examination of audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2009 to 2015. The ministerial response of the Ministry of Finance to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, 2nd session, 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. And finally, the ministerial response of the Treasury Division to the 4th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on the examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Thank you, Madam President.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. The annual audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission for year ending December 14th and December 2015. The annual audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission for year ending December 2015. The ministerial report of the Ministry of Public Utilities to the fourth report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee on examination of the system of internal audit within the public service.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers as listed on the order paper in my name. First, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to the third report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination of the system of inventory control within the public service. And second, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries to the fourth report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on examination of the system of internal audit within the public service. Thank you.
Attorney General.
Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the item appearing at number 36 on the order paper, the 6th annual report of the Police Complaints Authority for the period October 1st, 2015 to September 30th, 2016.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper as listed on the order paper in the names of the following ministers and in my own name. 1. The Minister of Public Administration and Communication. Papers number 21, 22, 25, and 68 to 70. 2. In the name of the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts. Papers number 71 to 73. 3. In the name of the Prime Minister. Papers number 77 to 80. 4. In the name of the Minister of Education. Papers number 81 and 82. 5. In the name of the Minister of Social Development and Family Services. Papers number 83 to 85. 6. In the name of the Minister of Health. Papers number 87 and 88. 7. In the name of the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs. Paper number 89. 8. In the name of the Minister of Housing and Urban Development. Papers number 90 to 91. 9. In the name of the Minister of Tourism. Paper number 92. 10. In the name of the Minister of Planning and Development. Paper number 93. And in my own name, papers number 94 to 107.
Reports from committees.
Senator Dookie.
Madam President, I have the honor to present the following report as listed on the order paper in the name of Senator Mark. The fifth report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, second session 2016-2017, 11th Parliament, on an examination into the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development with specific reference to accountability and transparency, inventory control, internal audit, subhead 2, goods and services, subhead 3, minor equipment purchases, and subhead 9, development program, consolidated fund, and infrastructure development fund.
Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I have the honor to present the following report listed on the order paper in the name of Senator Wade Mark. The 9th report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, second session 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Telecommunication Services of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, also known as TSTT, for the financial years 2008 to 2016. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Amin.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the honor to present the following reports listed in the order paper in my name, as well as in the name of Senator H.R. Ian Roach. The fourth report of the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, third session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the prevalence of sexually transmitted diseases among school students and into the general services administered to treat STDs in Trinidad and Tobago. And the fifth report of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions and Statutory Authorities, including the THA 3rd Session 2017-2018, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the efficiency and effectiveness of the Police Service Commission.
Urgent questions. Questions on notice. Question for oral answer.
Thank you, Madam President. The government is pleased to announce that under oral answers, we will be answering all questions save and except question 1, in which we ask for a 2-week deferral. And on written submissions, we will be answering questions 14, 16, and 29, which will be circulated. And we ask for a deferral of 2 weeks for question number 13 and 21.
So question number 1 is deferred for 2 weeks, 14 days, and questions 13 and 21 are deferred for 14 days as well. Senator Amin.
Question number 2 to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited entered into gas sales contracts with BP Trinidad and Tobago LLC and EOG Resources Trinidad Limited on May 4th, 2017 and June 13th, 2017, respectively. The terms and conditions of the gas sales contract are subject to contractual confidentiality provisions which preclude disclosure for legal and commercial reasons.
Senator Amin, next question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Question number 3 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the 9th Annual Actuarial Review Report of the NIS was laid in Parliament in November 2015. In July 2016, the legislative amendments were assented to, which allowed the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago to implement the 2 most important short-term recommendations of the 9th AR effective September 5th, 2016. 1, an increase in the contribution rates from 12% to 13.2%, and an increase in the maximum insurance earnings from $12,000 to $13,600. Both recommendations are implemented with the immediate impact of increasing the revenues of the NIB. Although these changes positively impacted the NIB in the short term, recent macroeconomic conditions have negatively impacted the NIB and offset these gains. Madam Speaker, long-term reform is therefore urgently needed to ensure NIB sustainability. These adjustments, as per the 9th AR, include further contribution rate increases, restraint in future benefit increases, and an increase in the retirement age for the unreduced pension from 60 to 65 over a 35-year period from 2025 to 2060. These major reforms require considerable public sensitization and national dialogue to be successfully implemented. The NIB has taken proactive steps to initiate discussions and consultations on these critical long-term reform measures. This is evident by the numerous stakeholder consultations, seminars, and newspaper articles, radio interviews, and television appearances by representatives of the NIB since October 2015. In addition to the ongoing dialogue with respect to reform, the NIB has directed its efforts towards improving aspects of its operations with the aim of controlling cost and bolstering its revenues from contributions and investment income. As it relates to costs, the NIB has maintained one of the lowest ratios of administrative expenditure to contribution income of social insurance systems in the English-speaking Caribbean. 5.3% for fiscal year 2016, well within the established limit of 7.5%. The organization continues to review processes and technology to further reduce this ratio. Regarding contribution, the NIB has reviewed its compliance structure to better monitor employers' obligations under the National Insurance Act to remit to the NIB the requisite contributions for the workers they employ. To ensure optimal performance of the investment fund, the NIB continues to explore strategies which provide high risk-adjusted yield while ensuring that adequate liquidity is provided for the payment of benefits. The NIB is considering increasing the overseas investment limit as one possible way to bolster fund performance. Thank you, Madam President.
Follow-up question, Madam. Through you, Madam President, to the Minister. Is there a time frame by which to implement these recommendations that you mentioned, and in particular, the recommendation to increase the retirement age for the National Insurance Board?
Madam President, I did mention in my response that the time frame for those significant measures was an extended period, which would run from 2025 to 2060. It's a 35-year implementation period for, in particular, the adjustment of the retirement age.
Madam President, through you, for the Minister. Regarding the motive to increase the age in terms of the flows of the fund, what assurances would the people have that should the demographics change, we don't increase the final age for benefits from 65 to another age? Given that that was the...
Obika, that question doesn't arise, okay? If you have another supplemental, you can put it. Next question, Senator Amin. No, Senator Ramkisoon.
Question number 22 to the Minister of Public Administration and Communications.
Madam President, I rise to provide a response to this question posed to the Honourable Minister of Public Administration and Communication. Madam President, it is to be noted that the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is guided by the Telecommunications Act, Chapter 4731. In particular, Sections 18J, 22.2J, 44.1 to 6, in respect of the management of telephone numbers. In this regard, Madam President, TAT has a document that guides the reuse, redistribution of phone numbers entitled National Number Plan, Central Office Codes and Home Network Identifiers, version 1.0. This plan establishes the rules and procedures for the assignment and reassignment of telephone numbers to telecommunications providers for use by their customers. This plan has been revised, consulted upon, pursuant to TAT's procedures for consultation, and version 2.0 will be published by the end of November 2017. Furthermore, Madam President, the Telecommunications Authority has also issued a determination notice 2016/01 on October 6, 2016, for the implementation of service provider number portability for mobile and landline telecommunication providers pursuant to Section 25(2)J of the Act. Mobile number portability was launched as required on October 31, 2016 by TSTT and Digicel. Fixed number portability was scheduled to be launched on November 28, 2016 by TSTT Flow, Digicel Play, Massey Communications, Lisa Communications Limited, and Open Telecommunications Limited. The Telecommunications Authority, Madam President, continues to work assiduously with landline telecommunications providers to ensure compliance with the Determination Notice 2016/01 so that fixed number portability can be made available in Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Senator Ramkisoon.
Through you, Madam President, to the Minister, responding on behalf of the Minister of Public Administration and Communications. In relation to the policy or the version 2.0 that will be released by the end of 2017 that you made mention in your deliberations, is it that they would be taking into consideration the measures where members of the public would be using these or reusing numbers that can lead to fraudulent activities when you sign up for an account and you have to use your number in terms of payments and other areas? And in order to obtain a mobile number, you need to have a valid form of ID, so the ID is related to the number. So that's what I'm asking, if that policy or that version would be taking that into consideration?
Minister.
Madam President, this policy this version 2.0 that is earmarked for publication by the end of November 2017 has come out of public consultation and taken into consideration the discussions with all the providers, and I believe that the Telecommunications Authority would have taken into consideration best practices and incorporated the required security measures that comes with portability of numbers. Thank you.
Senator Ramkissoon.
Minister, are you aware that when you can link numbers to your ID card number, you can also help with law enforcement with cases?
No, Senator Ramkissoon, that question does not arise.
Okay, in relation to the policy that you're taking into consideration, is there any area that will be looking at not reusing numbers or redistribution of numbers?
Madam President, I would not be able to provide that response. It's not within the context of what I've responded to.
Next question, Senator Ramkissoon.
Question number 23 to the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, in response to question 23, Roman 1, the audit was completed and a final report was submitted to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. Response to question 23, Roman 2, 30 companies representing all sectors of the domestic energy industry participated in the audit. The listing of these companies is attached as an appendix, which I will circulate, and do not read out the 30 names for this, in the interest of time. In response to question 23, Roman 3, the audited companies were provided with their results to allow them to take corrective action as required at their cost. DNV, which was the consulting firm, also recommended to the ministry a 16-step plan as a means of moving forward with asset integrity management, better known as AIM. The plan is based on the following: a continuous improvement process called Plan, Do, Check, and Act, a risk-based approach to prioritizing operators by their intrinsic hazard and AIM performance, continued use of AI, which is asset integrity audit protocols to record and monitor progress, development of personnel within the industry and the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, communication and interaction with stakeholders, and finally, sharing and benchmarking of performance. The recommendations of the audit are to be submitted to Cabinet shortly for its consideration. In the interim, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industry is in the process of developing an asset integrity management policy, which is expected to inform future legislative reform and which could have the following beneficial impact. A, minimizing and possibly elimination of injuries and, in extreme cases, loss of life. B, reduction and minimization of damages to plant and equipment with the attendant cost of repairs and adverse impact on business continuity. C, mitigation of the impact of energy sector operations on the environment and vulnerable communities. And D, incorporation of AIM in the development, operations, and behavior culture of energy sector organizations. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Ramkissoon.
Through you, Madam President. In relation to the report, as it's not public, it is not made public yet, or maybe it will, I would like to know if the report revealed integrity issues like lifespan, remaining life, or did it just reveal visual appearances of the assets that were reviewed?
Minister.
I'm not certain, but what the report did show, they ranked the companies, the 30 companies, in terms of least compliant, in terms of asset integrity, and best compliant. And they did, in fact, identify shortcoming and remedial action that they think is necessary to correct some of these asset integrity issues. Obviously, the companies at the top of the pack were world-class energy sector companies, and those that were in the bottom tier were
companies that have been saddled with aging assets in particular.
Madam President, our oil and gas sector, they use best practices. Is it that DNV was able to provide policy assistance, or were they able to review the asset integrity of our existing oil and gas sectors in these 30 companies?
Largely policy directive as to how to implement a credible asset integrity program, as distinct from physical inspection of assets and preparing a report.
I'm putting the minister on the spot a little bit here. These policies, we already have risk-based inspection in our organizations. We already have plan, do, check, act. What is it different that DNV was able to bring to the table to deal with these age assets, or these only 30 companies looked at?
Minister.
Well, they couldn't bring anything. They could just identify to the various companies what are the remedial actions should be taken and what type of systems you need to put in place to preserve asset integrity. Bearing in mind, those that have performed badly, the issue is cost. It will be a tremendous capital injection to bring asset integrity to a level. And in that sense, I referred specifically to Petrotrin, as you know.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, question number 24 to the Honourable Prime Minister.
Minister of Agriculture, Land.
Madam President, I rise to provide a response on behalf of the Honourable Prime Minister. Madam President, there are 5 options which are available to mothers placed in the circumstances set out in the question. Firstly, Madam President, mothers may approach the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago requesting alternative care for a child. The authority has the following services and programs available. First, once a child is in imminent danger and the authority is unable to identify family members to offer care to the child, the authority will take the child into its care and have the child placed at the children's home. This will ensure immediate care and protection of the child and may lead to long-term care depending on the investigation and the decision of the courts. Second, Madam President, the foster care program. The authority will place the child in the care of an approved foster parent in keeping with the mandate of the authority to provide care, protection, and rehabilitation of children, and in keeping with the decision of a court. Third, Madam President, the adoption program, which seeks to have the child legally adopted by persons who are approved as parents and seeking the adoption of a child or children. There is a long waiting list of approved parents awaiting adoption of children. The latest check revealed that there were 75 persons on the list. The authority will investigate and make recommendations with respect to the adoption of children in accordance with the Adoption of Children Act 2000. Fourthly, Madam President, mothers may also approach the National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services for support. This division has 9 district offices in Trinidad, and this division will provide the client with various forms of assistance, including psychosocial and financial assistance, as well as reference of the matter to the Children's Authority as necessary. And finally, Madam President, the Adolescent Mother Program. The Child Affairs Division of the Office of the Prime Minister is reviewing the Adolescent Mothers Program, which provides support for young pregnant girls. This program was delivered by the Child Welfare League on behalf of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago prior to 2017. This program was evaluated in 2017, and recommendations are being crafted for the future development of the program. These recommendations will be considered by Cabinet shortly. I thank you.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, can the Minister give an indication of whether or not the Office of the Prime Minister has enacted or considered options to deal with identification, intervention, or options for fathers who would have impregnated these mothers? Very often we focus on the fathers and tacitly facilitate the responsibility of the men who abandon these women, causing the abandonment in the first place because the women don't have support.
Please ask the question.
Is there an issue for a protocol for identifying and intervention of the males in these equations?
Minister.
Madam President, in as much as I would like to venture a response, the question is specific to mothers, and if the senator wishes, he can provide another question, and I'm sure the Office of the Prime Minister will be happy to respond.
Senator Richards, anything else?
Not in that question, Madam President.
Next question, Senator Richards.
Senator Ramdeen.
Oh, Senator Ramdeen, I apologize.
Through you, Madam President, and understanding the limited experience that the Minister would have in this area, can the Minister indicate what steps the Office of the Prime Minister or the Children's Authority would have taken to inform mothers or potential mothers of the options that have been given in answer to the question of Senator Richards, so that they will know that these are options that are available to them, whether they are pregnant or they have just delivered children in these circumstances?
Minister.
Madam President, the communication of the various options, in fact, communications of matters under the legislation relating to children, falls within the province of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And the Children's Authority conducts continuous communication with citizens of Trinidad and Tobago in relation to all the benefits that are available, in addition to which this is covered under the respective ministries, the Office of the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Thank you.
Senator Richards, next question.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, question number 25 to the Minister of Finance.
Minister in the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the air bridge is an essential service for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and as such, the government of Trinidad and Tobago does not have any plans currently for private investment in that sector. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Richards.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, does the ministry intend to look at reviving possible past associations of airline providers that may have serviced the bridge before?
Senator Richards, that doesn't arise based on the answer that was given. Any next question, Senator Richards?
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, question number 26 to the Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam President, I rise to offer a response on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Housing and Urban Development. The government has no intention at this point of reintroducing rent restrictions in general. However, the situation is under some active review as we speak.
Can the Honourable Attorney General provide a timeline within which we can expect some data from that review?
I think that the Honourable Senator has hit the nail on the head. The data has been the essential point of reference. There is currently a working committee between the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and the Attorney General's Office and the Ministry of Social Development, where the survey of living conditions is impacted against the demand for housing, as well as the legislative tweaks that may provide some measure of relief. The perspective that is afoot right now includes really state and condition of rental premises, the allocation of the government's housing program as it has now been modified to include the private sector inclusion, which of course traverses the mortgage market, the rent-to-own market, and the rental market, but also too with the impact of the local government reform that we're doing, where state and living conditions in rental premises in the private sector may very well form part of the assessment of this. To answer the question specifically now in terms of time frame, as we come to the end of the local government reform process that we intend to do in this parliamentary session, that is in the year of Parliament ending in September of this year, we anticipate that we should have some degree of settled position, which would include a mix of remedies from legislative to operational fixes to treat with the area. It's not quite as simple as it is. It does involve assessment of public and private sector intervention.
Senator Ramdeen.
Madam President, through you, could the Rent Assessment Board is set up under the Land Tenant Security of Tenure Act 1981. Could the Honourable Attorney General indicate whether there is an appointed Rent Assessment Board as we speak?
Thank you, Honourable Senator Ramdeen. There is no appointment. The effluxion, I'm told, really came into effect in the year 2002, so that doesn't apply in the current context. The other three rent restriction bits of legislation from Chapter 50, I can't remember the actual numbers, come down, are in there. But a proposal has come forward for consideration. It's under some active review right now, but the operation of that particular limb itself is not something that is alive right now.
Senator Ramdeen.
Honorable, through you, Madam President, Honorable Attorney General, the Act for the initial 30 years would have expired by effluxion of time in 2011.
The question, please.
Of course, no. But the operation of the Rent Assessment Board under that Act continues beyond that. So there is no Rent Assessment Board now for the purposes of those people who would have renewed their tenancy beyond 2011.
Thank you, Madam President. We're giving you some pressure with your voice. I catch what you're coming from, Senator Ramdeen. Yes, I was looking at it from the Rent Restriction Act itself. I'd have to really check. I haven't the position from the Ministry of Housing itself. It may very well be that it is, in fact, here for those that are still alive for tenancies that cross over the effluxion point, and I can certainly undertake to provide you with that information. Thank you.
Honourable Senators, with your leave, I'd like to revert to item 3 on the order paper. Senators, I have received the following correspondence from His Excellency the President Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, ORTT, SC. The Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago by His Excellency Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, ORTT, SC, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. To Ms. Alison Bash. Whereas by the provisions of paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the President, in exercise of the power vested in him and acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, is empowered to declare the seat of a senator to be vacant. Now, therefore, I, Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, in exercise of the power vested in me by the said paragraph E of subsection 2 of section 43 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, do hereby declare the seat of you, Alison Bash, to be vacant, with effect from the 28th of November 2017. Given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 28th day of November 2017. Appointment of a Senator. By His Excellency Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, ORTT, SC, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Ronald Huggins. In exercise of the power vested in me by paragraph A of subsection 2 of section 40 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I, Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, President as aforesaid, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, do hereby appoint you, Ronald Huggins, a Senator with effect from the 28th of November 2017. Given under my hand and the seal of the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago at the office of the President, St. Anne's, this 28th day of November 2017. Honourable Senators, a Senator is required to take the oath.
I, Ronald Huggins, having been appointed a Member of Parliament, do swear by Almighty God that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Trinidad and Tobago, will uphold the Constitution and the law, and will conscientiously and impartially discharge the responsibilities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, upon which I am about to enter.
Introduction of bills. The Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Spot Speed Camera Enforcement Amendment Bill 2017 in the name of the Attorney General. Motion relating to the business or sitting of the Senate and moved by a minister.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 31.5, I beg to move that the Senate consider government business today instead of private business.
Honorable Senators, the question is that the Senate consider government business instead of private business. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Senate agree to the following appointments to the Joint Select Committees. Mr. Ronald Huggins, in lieu of Ms. Alison Baksh, on the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises and the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. Mr. Robert Luhant, in lieu of Mr. Michael Coppin, on the Joint Select Committee on National Security. Dr. Lester Henry, in lieu of Mr. Michael Coppin, on the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Ms. Alison West, in lieu of Ms. Ayanna Lewis, on the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. Mr. Saddam Hussein, in lieu of Mr. Wayne Sturge, on the Joint Select Committee on National Security. Ms. Anita Haynes, in lieu of Mr. Roger Samuel, on the Joint Select Committee on Foreign Affairs. Mr. Saddam Hussein, in lieu of Mr. Roger Samuel, on the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Diversity, and Equality. Mr. Taharaka Obika, I'll leave out the first name next time. In lieu of Mr. Wayne Sturge, on the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Ms. Anita Haynes, in lieu of Ms. Khadija Amin, on the Joint Select Committee on Parliamentary Broadcasting Committee. Mr. Tahaka Obika, in lieu of Mr. Roger Samuel, on the Public Accounts Committee. Ms. Melissa Ramkisoon, in lieu of Ms. Jennifer Rafool, on the Public Accounts Committee. Ms. Jennifer Rafool, in lieu of Dr. Daneshwar Mahaber, on the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. And Dr. Daneshwar Mahaber, in lieu of Ms. Melissa Ramkisoon, on the Joint Select Committee on Foreign Affairs. I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is that the Senate agree to the following appointments to the Joint Select Committees. Mr. Ronald Huggins, in lieu of Ms. Alison Bash, on the Joint Select Committee on State Enterprises and the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee. Mr. Robert Luhant, in lieu of Mr. Michael Coppin, on the Joint Select Committee on National Security. Dr. Lester Henry, in lieu of Mr. Michael Coppin, on the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Ms. Alison West, in lieu of Ms. Ayanna Lewis, on the Joint Select Committee on Social Services and Public Administration. Mr. Saddam Hussein, in lieu of Mr. Wayne Sturge, on the Joint Select Committee on National Security. Ms. Anita Haynes, in lieu of Mr. Roger Samuel, on the Joint Select Committee on Foreign Affairs. Mr. Saddam Hussein, in lieu of Mr. Roger Samuel, on the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Diversity, and Equality. Mr. Tahaka Obika, in lieu of Mr. Wayne Sturge, on the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Ms. Anita Haynes, in lieu of Ms. Khadija Amin, on the Joint Select Committee on Parliamentary Broadcasting Committee. Mr. Tahaka Obika, in lieu of Mr. Roger Samuel, on the Public Accounts Committee. Ms. Melissa Ramkisoon, in lieu of Ms. Jennifer Rafool, on the Public Accounts Committee. Ms. Jennifer Rafool, in lieu of Dr. Daneshwar Mahabir, on the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, and Dr. Daneshwar Mahabir, in lieu of Ms. Melissa Ramkisoon, on the Joint Select Committee on Foreign Affairs. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it.
Public Business, Government Business, Bill, second reading.
Attorney General.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, be now read a second time. Madam President, it's good to be back in the Senate, and I welcome honourable senators just arriving at both benches for the government and opposition, Senator Raquel Ghani and Senator Ronald Huggins, to their respective positions, and also welcome Senator Sidney, who is no stranger to the independent bench and this Parliament. Madam President, today we seek to amend the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. This piece of law came into effect by an Act of Parliament number 42 of 1934. 83 years later, and some 95 amendments post, the one thing that we're sure about is that the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act is one which really is tied to the life and blood of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. After all, it is the mechanism by which we regulate the use and behavior of users on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago. It is the mechanism by which we control the manner in which we arrive to our workplaces, to our homes. It is the place where we see life of Trinidad and Tobago in existence. And in the many years that we have come from 1934 to today's date, the amendments to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act have really come about and have tied in to material improvements in technology and in development in Trinidad and Tobago. Today we come with a very short bill. It's actually 2 clauses long. Seems to be deceivingly simple. The first clause is the short title of the bill, and the second clause proposes 2 subsections which treat with, first of all, an amendment to Section 62(7) of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, and also an amendment to the second schedule. The aim of the bill is, in fact, quite simply put, to adjust the speed limits in Trinidad and Tobago, and specifically the classification of motor vehicles that can be used on the roads. The current law, as it's structured in Section 62, which falls under Part 5 of the parent law, Part 5 dealing with the actual provisions for offences, driving and other offences, and general conditions relating to the use of roads. Section 62 of the Act is really one which has to have reflection, upon which we must have reflection, to explain the approach that is now before this Honourable Senate. Section 62 is the section which treats with speed limits. And permit me to put onto the record, to make sense of the amendments proposed, the actual content of some of the provisions of Section 62. Section 62(1) says, subject as hereinafter provided, it shall not be lawful for any person to drive a motor vehicle of any class or description on any road, A, outside a built-up area at a speed greater than the speed specified in the second schedule, etc. B, within a built-up area at a speed greater than the speed specified in the second schedule, etc. And C, whether outside or within a built-up area at a special speed limit imposed as a speed exceeding the speed limit imposed in relation to that class or description of vehicle. Subsection 2, that is 62 subsection 2, says that the minister may by order impose special speed limits with respect to any road, whether inside, whether outside, or within a built-up area. We then go through subsection 3, which provides that the Chief Technical Officer at the Ministry of Works may by order introduce a special speed limit. We then come to improvements in the law which introduced the offence and the quantification that is to be attracted for a breach of the law. We pass through then the amendments in 2014 which introduced the speed gun. And then we come to subsection 7. Subject to affirmative resolution of Parliament, the President may by regulation amend the second schedule. And in subsection 8, those very important concepts of a built-up area or outside a built-up area fall for first reflection. And in subsection 8, it says, in this section and subsection 62A, built-up area means City of Port of Spain, City of San Fernando, Borough of Arima, or any other area or road or portion thereof declared by order of the board to be a built-up area for the purposes of this section. So, the law as set out in section 62 says to us that there are a couple core concepts that we must have in mind. One, you are to travel at a speed which is specified in the second schedule. Two, speeds are to be disaggregated on the basis of general speeds and special speeds. Three, in respect of general speeds, there's a further disaggregation for built-up areas and outside built-up areas. In the parent law, 62.8, a built-up area is initially defined as the 3 cities and any other area so declared by order. When we come to the second schedule prescribed the speed limits in this country. And section 62 was treated with by 47 of 1956. That's the act that treated with the first description of speeds. That was amended by Act number 146 of 1969. Now, or I should say by way of legal notice that would have come in respect of these things. When we looked at the second schedule, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 categories of vehicles described there. And there were various speeds prescribed from the perspective of outside a built-up area or inside a built-up area. In particular, in the second schedule, we were treating with tractors, a motor omnibus or a bus, motor vehicles constructed to carry more than 10 passengers, a goods vehicle, the weight of which exceeded 2,540 kilograms with or without a trailer, a goods vehicle, licensed weight of which does not exceed 2,540 kilograms with a trailer. Then we had private motor vehicle with trailer and any other motor vehicle. And essentially, what was set out here, for tractors, you could travel inside a built-up area at 35 kilometers per hour. Outside a built-up area at 35 kilometers per hour, inside at 20 kilometers. For a bus, 65 for outside a built-up area and 50 for within. For the class of vehicles at the weight of 2,540 kilograms and above, 65 kilometers on the outside areas and 50 kilometers in the built-up areas. And then for private motor vehicles with a trailer, similarly 65 and 50, and any other motor vehicle 80 and 50. So that's the orientation in terms of what the current law says. Let's put it into summary form. Essentially, in 1969, we last treated with the amendments to speed in this country. In the law as it stands, if the law is to be changed in respect of the speed limit, the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, which we read in law to mean the Cabinet, must bring a resolution to this House to amend the law by way of affirmative resolution. And that is the case because in 1935, come forward, up to 1969, etc., the roads and arteries of Trinidad and Tobago were very few. We did not, at that period in time, have the 4 highways that we operate with. We did not have the technology and engineering, construction, reflection that our roads are now gauged against. We certainly didn't have flyovers. We didn't have the bankment and ramping that we have off of the primary roads into the secondary roads. Nor did we have the kind of vehicles and the engineering and safety mechanisms for vehicles that we have now. And changing the speed limit in 1969 was something which the entire Parliament got together on an affirmative resolution and decided it must come to the direct focus of the parliamentarians sitting in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate. But we are most respectfully a far distance away from that, both from a technological point of view, from a delegation point of view, insofar as the technocrats in the Ministry of Works and Transport in particular are involved. And the mechanism that we propose now to be considered by this Honourable Senate is that we no longer invite the Parliament in Section 62(7) of the parent law to move itself to consider an affirmative resolution for changing the speed limit, but that instead we allow the Minister, by way of order, to do that. That is built upon the premise that we would also have to treat with the specific orders which I referred to. There were two types of orders when I read Section 62, and I'll just remind you. One is the special speed limit order, and two is the built-up, non-built-up area order. So the law as constructed is you amend the second schedule, which provides for the speed limit across the classes of vehicles I mentioned, omnibus, passenger vehicles with over 10, any type of vehicle with or without trailer, etc. That's the second schedule. And then the orders describe what you treat with in terms of built up or non-built up, and whether they're to be special orders. Now, special orders apply, just by way of information, to areas which are not within your built-up or outside of built-up categorization. Under the existing law, the fact is that the built-up areas were treated in a very particular way. In the current law, the built-up areas were treated by way of actual definition of what is built up. The existing law, the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, went through a prescription of every area that was considered to be built up. That, in fact, is something which we propose to be changed by way of ministerial order. What we propose to come after the amendment that the Senate engages in considering, and if it is so minded to pass, is that we will pass a special order which will be speed limits built up areas order. And what we do is we propose, instead of naming every road that is built up, what we actually do is to say all of Trinidad and Tobago is in fact to be considered as built up, and these are the following areas which are not built up. And I'll tell you why we do that in just a short while. What we also propose to do is to engage in a second form of order, which is the special speed limits amendment order, which will come after this law is considered. And in that order, we will treat specifically with certain secondary roads or ramps. And I'll explain that in a moment. So under the current law, we had this peculiar prescription that, for instance, in the island of Tobago, all of Tobago was considered to be built up. So in Tobago, you could only drive at 50 kilometers per hour, full stop, the whole of Tobago. Notwithstanding the fact that you had highways in Tobago, such as the Claude Noel Highway, etc., come into existence, the law as it stands in Tobago, because it's defined as built up, is that you can only drive at 50 kilometers per hour. But with the advent of technology and engineering, and with the considerable rollout of highways in Trinidad and Tobago, as we've now come to know them and enjoy them and sometimes fear them, what we noticed was people, if we kept with the same formula in the existing law, would be required to adjust their speeds on a minute-by-minute basis, even though you were proceeding along one stretch of road. And just to give you the example, at the abattoir in Port of Spain, you would have one speed limit. When you got to Aranjuez, you would have another speed limit. When you took the stretch between Aranjuez and Curep, you'd have another speed limit. You'd then change speed limit. And the same thing would happen as you progressed past Chaguanas, for instance, because as you passed the Chaguanas area, your speed limits would vary. So the platonic movement, as it's referred to from an engineering perspective from the Ministry of Works and Transport, and that is how the platoon of vehicles moves. All cars moving at that particular pack at a particular rate would constantly be changing because the built-up and outside of built-up areas simply didn't make sense. Let's stick a pin for a moment. Many people in Trinidad and Tobago said to us that the government changed the speed limit and put in an 80 kilometers per hour. For those of us that drive from San Fernando, it became an instant calf workout. Your legs were measured by restraint because as you stepped on your accelerator, you were caused to restrain yourself from stepping lest you crossed 80 kilometers per hour. But it's actually not true that the speed limit was changed. The speed limit since 1969 was 80 kilometers per hour. And what happened was very important amendments brought in 2014 by the last government on the back of a series of amendments, including the work done by a government prior to that for the introduction of seat belts, for breathalyzers. The speed guns, when introduced in 2014, caused a shift in the culture of Trinidad and Tobago when implemented in 2016 with the implementation of speed guns under the present regime in the continuance of governance, starting with the last government and continuing into this. What happened was the law was in fact not changed to 80 kilometers per hour, the law was simply applied. And lo and behold, the theory of law changing culture as a concept and as a reality came into our fulminations. Because 6 little speed guns along the highways of Trinidad and Tobago, which as at today's date resulted in 18,000 tickets being issued under these 6 speed guns, caused the platonic movement of cars along our nation's highways to move to 80 kilometers per hour on the outside built-up areas and 50 kilometers per hour or lower depending upon the categorization of vehicles that we had. As we come now, the law to take us to this point, as now standing before the Senate, really involved a considerable amount of work. And that work was based upon a number of entities coming together. First of all, the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Engineering Division in particular had to go and physically inspect every single road in Trinidad and Tobago, every single ramp off of every primary road onto secondary road in Trinidad and Tobago, all of the secondary roads, and then treat with the engineering specifications of those roads as a matter of first priority so that we could define what is built up and what is not built up and what the speed should be. The engineering considerations along the major highways of our road had next to be considered, and that is the design speed versus the desired speed. And I can confirm today that the design speed of our major primary roads and highways in Trinidad and Tobago is in fact at 125 kilometers per hour. The data which fed into that construct included data lifted in the period 2012 to 2013 under the microwave sensitivity structures, and I'll get you the name for that in just a moment. It was, I believe, the RTMS system. Pardon? Yeah. And the structure that fed on top of that was spot analysis and spot speed analysis on the very highways. Occupancy rates, travel velocity, and time of day considerations across each and every built-up area and outside of built-up area. What fell next into consideration was the passenger information as it related to cars moving against pedestrians, as it also factored against the technology for preventative measures for accidents, railway systems, lighting systems, the New Jersey barrier systems, all of the mechanisms to treat with accidents on our roadways were treated. So the Ministry of Works and Transport itself did a significant amount of work, but this was ably assisted by non-governmental agencies such as, and I wish to single out in particular, the Arrive Alive movement and Mrs. Sharon Inglefield, who, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago and as an advocate for change in culture on our roads, has produced immense data for consumption in Trinidad and Tobago so that we're not dealing only with a governmental system and recommendation, but a societal system and recommendation. And that data, and for the record, included the vehicle information management data and the actual data residing at the licensing office. When we looked at data, it's interesting to note that we are at 1,016,265 registered vehicles on our roads, according to the database at the Ministry of Works and Transport Licensing Division. There are 654,895 issued driver's permits in Trinidad and Tobago. When you factor it, that's almost 2 vehicles to every license permit that we have in existence. But when we look to the data coming out of entities like Arrive Alive, etc., we note that death and road fatalities, those caused in an accident in the car and those persons killed outside of a car, we're looking at a distribution of 76% male deaths, 24% female deaths. When we look to the age brackets, etc., and fatalities, 15 to 24, 16% in that age bracket accounted for the number of road fatalities. In the age bracket 25 to 34, it was 23%. In the age bracket 35 to 45, it was 9%. In the age bracket 45 to 54, it was 17%. So what we saw is that those on the upper end of the spectrum, perhaps midlife crisis years, 45 to 54, were equal to juvenile drivers as well in the period 17 to 24, 16% versus 17%. So that road fatalities and accidents actually are no respecters of age limit, and that these accidents can happen at any point in time. Madam President, the time in the Senate versus House is slightly different. What is the end time in quarter past? Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Ramdeen. He's quick on the draw.
General, you have until 19 minutes past 3.
Thank you for the precision, Madam President. 19 minutes past. I'll take the 4 minutes extra. So, Madam President, the data which fed into the considerations included road user, time user, platonic user, engineering specification and design information. We also had, Madam President, the very important consideration of these users applied, as I've said before, outside built-up area, in built-up area, and in the special zones of ramps, etc. Now, what we can say, Madam President, is that there was a further consideration which finds itself in Clause 2 of the bill. Not only was the understanding of what the speed should be across the class of vehicles factored, but also to the type of vehicles which we have, in particular the heavy T users. And what we noticed, Madam President, is that for the second schedule reference to 2,554, is it, kilograms? 2,540 kilograms, that particular measurement for the MGW weight, that categorization where you would have to have the speed at 65 and 50, that caused an area of great concern in recognition of an advance on technology. Every person with a Hilux vehicle, with certain types of Nissan, Ford, Toyota, etc., the SUV class of vehicle finds itself really in the category between 2,540 kilograms and up to 3,200 kilograms. And even though these vehicles are being used really as passenger vehicles, really more akin to the definition of any other motor vehicle in the second schedule at subparagraph G of that existing law, what happened was they would be required to observe a different speed limit. And they would obviously affect the platonic movement of the vehicles on the road. From an engineering perspective, it affects how fast we get to work, how fast we get home. It affects the ease of doing business. It affects road rage. It affects frustration. It affects us all in every sense of the word, because we have a category of vehicle class that just didn't fit the type, as it did in 1969, where you had a Bedford truck. I know that Senator Mahabir would know these cars and vehicles well. He's a connoisseur of other vehicles and types, and he's into restoration, as am I, of certain other vehicles. But the point is, this was really causing and is causing a significant problem for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The government obviously couldn't just wave the magic wand and submit to the demands of the population to say, let's speed up, for a number of reasons. Firstly, we really ought not to just be doing this thing capriciously. It must be data-driven. Secondly, we really did need to factor how the law was being applied. What is the result of an observed speed limit? And then, too, we also had to factor what the law is going to look like across the amendments that we have considered already as a parliament in this current session and those that are to come. And I'm very pleased to say, Madam President, that we obviously had a significant debate in this House to amend the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act and the associated law that went with it, that's the enforcement legislation. We took some very important decisions that we would decriminalize offenses, certain offenses described. We would introduce a system of demerit points. We would factor them against red light camera enforcement. We would work out how penalty notices, etc., should apply. And in considering those amendments, we have another set of amendments which are to come, one of which has just been laid today, and that is, in fact, the spot speed enforcement mechanisms. Now, I'll remind, the government has taken the approach to amend the road traffic laws, the motor vehicle and road traffic laws, in stages. Why? As a country, we spent the better part of 2 decades trying to come up with the perfect law to replace the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. Successive governments came with motor vehicle authority legislation. It was just too large. It was too complicated. The fine points occupied a lot of time. And therefore, the law just didn't pass muster either in the 9th Parliament or in the 10th Republican Parliament. But in the 11th Parliament, as we now sit, we've taken the approach of taking it in stages. And I think it therefore important that I report that the stages of proclamation and implementation of that which we have already considered, which will be layered by that which is to come, spot speeds which are now laid in this House and which this Parliament will consider in due course, will also be met with RFID identification, management, etc., as we layer up this approach and amendments to the licensing authority mechanisms, in particular how we treat with fraud. But I'm very pleased to say that in driving the amendments and in factoring how we treat with speed and enforcement and engineering and designs, we're in a very healthy position. Because far too often we've had the experience of passing law which is not implemented because the operationalization takes far too long. I'm pleased to say that, in fact, the provision of driver's permit via a centralized computer system has been completed. I'm pleased to say that implementation of a data center for hosting licensing electronic systems databases has been completed. That the modification of forms, driver's permit transactions, vehicle registration transactions, that is scheduled to be completed by December 2017. The online application requests for driver's permits and renewals is earmarked for February 2018. The data sharing with police has been completed. The implementation of computerized vehicle registration system has been completed. The online access to basic vehicle records is complete. The printing of certified copies at all licensing sites, 4 sites have been completed. The balance are to be completed by December 2017. The printing of certified copies at TT Post is earmarked for March 2018. The vehicle pre-inspection ports is complete. The electronic ticket system, the handheld devices, and the enforcement officers, which will operationalize the red light enforcement and other mechanisms that we took, demerit points, etc., in the last round of amendments that we considered, that is earmarked for April 2018. And data sharing with the police is already completed, as I mentioned before. It's repeated here, sorry. What does that mean in a nutshell? The law which we considered a couple months ago is earmarked for full implementation in April 2018. And that's going to radically transform the manner in which we transact business at the licensing authority, the manner in which road enforcement is managed, the direct impact upon police time, the impact upon user time in our court system. It will result in the removal of close to 100,000 motor vehicle and traffic offences in magistrates' courts of Trinidad and Tobago. And it will take Trinidad and Tobago into a materially advantageous position, much like that dream that we have all often possessed and expressed we all wish to achieve. And that is the ability to go online, obtain your driver's permit, do your renewals, have email reminders, and know where you stand in terms of offences which are now violations of the law, in terms of demerit points, etc. And I wish to offer a sincere congratulations to the Minister of Works and Transport for driving this process, with an unstinting support coming from the technocratic end of the Ministry of Works and Transport. And I wish to say this, very often we as a society complain about the public service. Indeed, there are some things to complain about. Some attitudes may not be the best, but I want to really express my pride and admiration for the hard-working members of the Ministry of Works and Transport, for their dedication in driving this implementation process. And that has been amplified, catalyzed, exacerbated, encouraged by the judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, by the Office of the Attorney General in its coordination and coordinating all of these activities as well, and importantly, by the private stakeholders such as entities like Arrive Alive and other entities that engage in this process in a large room, because when you walk into these rooms, there's sometimes up to 26 people on the table, all coordinating the efforts to make sure that we implement laws which we desire. So, honourable members, the law before us is, in my view, a step in the right direction. We are occupying parliamentary time in stages along this process, because getting policy to match with prescription, to match with consultation, to match with implementation and operationalization, if we took too large a trawl, it would be significantly delayed in its output. And the citizens of this country are crying for assistance. A word of caution to the users of Trinidad and Tobago's roads: the law has not passed yet. Please, to the media, don't edit the contribution to say that we're considering this and it is a fait accompli. The law must be considered by this Honourable Senate. If the Senate so chooses to pass this law, declared interests all had, perhaps I should say that any one of us that drive up the highway or down the highway to San Fernando and back have a declared interest in the speed, being a little bit more relaxed. But I want to caution that the law is not a fait accompli, and that it is only after this law is assented to and becomes the law that this becomes something which will be applied by law enforcement. I also offer a further word of caution. We have supplemented the speed guns in Trinidad and Tobago by the introduction of 9 new guns. And we intend to further supplement the speed limits in Trinidad and Tobago by the introduction of spot speed cameras right along the nation's roads. So we are going to be enforcing the law in the very necessary measure to ensure safety and to ensure obedience to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago from a societal perspective. I look forward to the contributions of honourable members of the Senate. I'm certainly with an open mind. The debate in the House of Representatives was a very enjoyable one. I think we were all ad idem and in agreement with the aim and purpose of the law. And in those circumstances, Madam President, I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, be now read a second time. Senator Ramdeen.
Good afternoon, Madam President. And thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this debate this afternoon on an act to amend the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850. Madam President, let me say at the outset, that I join with the Attorney General in saying that this is clearly a step in the right direction and a progressive move in the development of Trinidad and Tobago, and it's long in coming. I would also like to say that the approach of taking the development of the road traffic, in the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act in a piecemeal manner, as described by the Attorney General, I think is a mature way of moving forward with getting our road traffic laws up to date. And I would like to compliment all of these steps that have been taken by the government in bringing our laws up to date and in building upon what, as the Attorney General has said, the work of different administrations. And I think it is a step in the right direction. This work has started a long time ago, and we are now reaping the rewards of the hard work that different administrations have done. I don't think this afternoon, respectfully, Madam President, that I can add much to the legislative aspect of the description given by the Attorney General of the two clauses that we are here to debate. But I would like to make a contribution to outline some of the ways in which this law, if implemented in a holistic approach, there are certain things that we can do in order to improve where we are with respect to road safety. Because this piece of legislation, Madam President, as I see it, is really about road safety and about striking the balance that the government has to try and balance of preventing gridlock on our roads, but at the same time, efficiently managing the movement of vehicles, whether they be in built-up areas or whether they be anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, in preparing for this debate, sometimes it's a very difficult task, because when one considers what we've lost and the lives that we've lost as a result of deaths on our roads, I don't think we can quantify the extent that our country suffers every single year. In the other place, the Minister of National Security indicated that there has been a drastic decline in road deaths, but we still are over 100 per year. And I would say from where I stand, Madam President, one road death, like we say with respect to murders, is one too many. Only last night, Madam President, when one looks at the online version of the Express today, we suffered another road death last night in Barpo, where, if I can quote from the Express, Shamila Singh, 39-year-old mother, lost her life, unfortunately, last night. And what is even more unfortunate about this, Madam President, is that it was a vehicular accident where there was a baby involved. And that baby, who's 8 months old, has now lost her mother. That, Madam President, follows upon a most unfortunate incident that occurred not very far away from the incident that took place last night, which was in Barpo on the Penal Rock Road about 2 weeks ago, where brothers Brandon Rupnarine, 9, and Darian Rupnarine, 6, lost both their parents in a vehicular accident. And Madam President, it is a very, very emotional and a heart-wrenching experience, because I attended that funeral of those two parents, and to see a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old in those circumstances where I hope that my words can describe the horror of that experience, but you can see a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old looking at both their parents and not even able to go close to the coffin that holds their both parents. And those two children, 9 and 6, will not have their parents for the rest of their lives. But at the same time, having described that, Madam President, I want to pay tribute to the 2 police officers. I don't know if they were from the Penal or Barpo police station or from the Children's Authority that took care of those 2 children throughout that ordeal, because I witnessed 2 police officers that clearly were discharging their duty in the absence of the parents of those 2 children. And in these dark circumstances, Madam President, sometimes there's a shining light and we must pay tribute to either the children, those on the Children's Authority, and those in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Madam President, I want to implore the Attorney General and the government that in the last month, we've seen 3 children orphaned by road deaths. And while the Children's Authority is there at times to provide that counseling during the first few days after, I think that there is a greater need for the Children's Authority, and whether it be the Ministry of Social Development or the Office of the Prime Minister, to take a greater interest in those children who have lost their parents and are orphaned as a result of road deaths. It is not simply a matter of looking after them on the day of the funeral, and then after that, nothing comes of it. These are children that would be scarred for life. And we have a duty as a society, as a government, as an opposition, as a country, to look after those children, because they depend upon us for the rest of their lives in the absence of their parents. So that whatever steps that can be taken, Attorney General, I want today implore that we do that. Madam President, there's one aspect of that incident that I think we can build upon in this debate. And the aspect of that is that where this accident took place, the sister of the deceased mother called in the report that was reported in the Express of November 7th, 2017, called for the street lights to be repaired and for pavements to be constructed to make the area safer for residents. And Madam President, we've heard from the government over and over again that we are in times where there are financial constraints. But I am sure, Madam President, and today I can ask the Minister of Local Government, and I am sure that the Minister of Local Government would listen to the call and heed the call, that whereas we might not be able to construct pavements on the side of every road throughout the country, I'm sure that the local corporations and the city corporations can at least cut the grass so that you will not have people walking on the roads themselves, and they might still have something to walk on to give them some measure of safety apart from just walking on the roads, because it is on the roads that these 2 parents were walking when they were knocked down and met their deaths. So today I want to ask the Minister of Local Government, as he always listens, Madam President, to ask the local corporations, the regional corporations, to take an interest in those rural areas. Because, Madam President, the Attorney General has outlined a lot of progressive steps that have been taken by the government with respect to speed and safety. But I think all of us here in the Senate will understand that the only place that we really see the speed guns being implemented are on the highways. Correct. And there is a need. We have speed limits in built-up and rural areas, and we see no implementation of any enforcement of the speed limits in any areas outside of the highways. And perhaps that is why, most recently, the road deaths that we have experienced throughout the country have not really been on the highways, but they have been in the rural areas where the police simply do not enforce the law. And as a Parliament and as a Senate, we can discharge our duty to pass legislation. But at the end of the day, if the legislation is not enforced, we are not going to benefit from the good work that the Attorney General has indicated, the technocrats at the Ministry, the lower house, the Senate, and if this act is assented to, will all amount to nothing if at the end of the day, those who are responsible for the enforcement of the speed limits, as the Attorney General has said, are not only for the highways. They are speed limits to be enforced throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And while I applaud the attempts of not only the speed guns, the fixed cameras that are going to be put up, but Attorney General, there must, in the developed countries, you have the speed cameras throughout the countries, and we have to make some attempt to curb the speeding that occurs off of the highways, and that is what is going to help in addition to what we do on the highways. So the other issue that flows from this, Madam President, is the issue of street lights. Street lights are placed on the road as a safety mechanism for users of the road. And in this particular case, again, we have a circumstance where, even if we look at the Solomon Hochoy Highway, Madam President, there are large areas, very dangerous stretches on the Solomon Hochoy Highway. When you drive at hours early in the morning and late at night that have absolutely no street lights. And again, I want to make the call today to the Minister of Public Utilities and through the Attorney General. The Minister is not here. But the street lights are there already. All it takes is perhaps to change the bulbs, and it will make the roads so much safer. The lack of street lights, Madam President. I got a flat tire at Pointe-a-Pierre one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. And as you go to change the tire, the street light goes out. And it not only with respect to road safety, it's dangerous. It's also dangerous if somebody has an emergency and stops on the side of the highway, because it creates the opportunity for all kinds of things to go wrong with respect to person's safety. And I want to call today, or make a call today, or a request today from the Attorney General to the Minister of Public Utilities to please, if we can't put new lights there, at least let's just change the bulbs and get the lights that are there working. And again, not only on the highways, but in all of the areas where you have roads. Because the lack of street lighting is going to cause all of the roads, no matter how good they might be, to be more dangerous for all the road users. So I want to start off by making those two calls to the Minister of Local Government and the Minister of Public Utilities. Now, Madam President, as I indicated earlier, this is a law, the responsibility of which for the enforcement rests with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And Madam President, I want to raise an issue here today, frontally to the Attorney General, and in the absence of the Minister of National Security, through the Attorney General, to the National Security Council, of which the Attorney General is a member. And it's a matter that disturbs me very, very deeply, Madam President. And I'll explain why. We have had 7 murders over the last weekend. We've heard a former senior police officer, Johnny Abraham, making comments after the death of the doubles vendor in Central, that it seems as though the police have thrown their hands in the air. That was the comment that he made. And I'm going directly to why I say that, Madam President. The Attorney General knows very well, and the government will know very well, that the sanction strength of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service at any material time is almost 1,500 to 1,800 officers less than what the sanction strength is, for varying reasons. And I don't think the government, the opposition, or the independent bench is going to doubt the fact that we have a shortage of police officers to do the job that they are required to do to protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And let me tell you where I'm going with this, Madam President. Madam President, anyone who travels the Solomon Ochoa Highway from north to south, after you pass Freeport proceeding south, there's a highway roti shop on the left-hand side. And I want to tell you, Madam President, that while the sanction strength of the police service is almost 1,500 officers less, we have almost 3 robberies a day, 2 motor vehicle larcenies per day, people being raped, murdered, and kidnapped throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has the resources to have 2 police vehicles parked up at the highway roti shop with 4 officers, 2 in each vehicle, for about 12 hours every day, guarding the highway roti shop. And I refer to them as roti police, because that is what they are. And I want to say this today, and I'm going to put it on the handset today and make no apologies for it. We cannot afford to have 4 police officers in 2 police vehicles sitting down for 12 hours guarding the highway roti shop and telling people, proceed when you stop to buy roti, proceed. And Madam President, you know why that is so? Do you know why we have 12 by 4 is 48 hours of police service sitting down there with a mic every day guarding roti? It's because a deputy commissioner of police in this country wanted free roti for his son's wedding. And that is why the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has 2 vehicles parked up there so that people wouldn't buy roti. How could that possibly be right in 2017? How that could possibly be right when people's houses are being broken into, and when they call, you hear a police station telling you they don't have a vehicle? And you have 4 officers there guarding roti, 12 hours for the day. So it is something that deeply disturbs me. And to tell you how deeply it disturbs me, Madam President, today I want the Attorney General, through the Minister, through the National Security Council, to find out where PCU 692 was parked up yesterday for 12 hours. Because when I passed yesterday, I decided, you know what, let me take down the registration number so that through the National Security Council, the Attorney General can ask the Commissioner of Police, what is really going on with those two vehicles, Attorney General? Because let us pull the station diary and see what is the assignment they are put on every single day. Because they are leaving a police station to park up there for 12 hours. Roti police, I call them, for 12 hours to simply tell people, proceed, don't stop, proceed. Now, I want to take a step back, Madam President, and deal with the issue that I highlighted at the very beginning, which is that it is good that we have achieved through the speed guns and all of the different mechanisms that the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Ministry of the Attorney General has implemented to cut down on the road deaths. But, Madam President, we must take notice, as the Attorney General has said, for the good work that Arrive Alive has done, and I think Ms. Inglefield must be complimented for the work that they've done. But I think a lot of times, Madam President, as a country, they say us in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a very short memory. And when pieces of legislation as simple as this come to our Parliament and we debate it and it's passed, because I can let the government know through the Attorney General today that you will get the support for this legislation, I think, from everyone here, because we understand the forward-thinking approach that this would bring. But I think it is important, whenever we pass legislation like this, Madam President, to reflect upon the mischief that the legislation is designed to achieve. And speeding is a serious problem in this country. And unless we take hold and manage carefully our roads, we will continue to lose a lot of lives that are very valuable to us. And unapologetically, Madam President, I say so because in the field that I am in, speaking from where I stand, we have lost, through road accidents, two very, very distinguished individuals who I don't think the void will ever be filled, more so in the times that we experience today. In 1999, Madam President, we lost 4 individuals, one of whom was Justice Carlisle Barrett and his wife, a distinguished member of the bar and a distinguished judge. And some years later, Madam President, almost 10 years later, we lost one of the most distinguished members to have graced our courts, our bar, our judiciary, in that person of the Justice of Appeal, Wendell Kangaloo, God rest his soul. And I remember when I heard, Madam President, of that accident, I actually was proceeding to the airport that morning when it took place. And it was heart-wrenching because I think the Attorney General, myself, and more so you, Madam President, would understand the loss that this country suffered by the loss through a road accident, a most unfortunate road accident of somebody that I admired, I'm sure the Attorney General admired, and all of Trinidad and Tobago lost. Somebody who was a footstep away of becoming a Chief Justice in this country. And when I pulled the research last night, and one actually, without going into the details of it, Madam President, see what the compliments were and the accolades that were paid to someone like that. I can say for myself, from where I stand, Justice of Appeal Wendell Kangaloo was someone that I admired greatly and someone who was a mentor. And I want to say so unreservedly that someone who, if they were alive today, we would not be in the position that we find ourselves in, because he was someone, Madam President, that I can say held the profession and the administration of justice in the highest regard. And what is taking place today would clearly never have taken place if Justice of Appeal Wendell Kangaloo was around today. And that is why this piece of legislation is so important to all of us, Madam President. It is important because every single one of us here, as we speak today, would have had experiences where, at the end of the day, we are all filled. We are all filled with experiences where we can understand what it is like. There is one particular spot on the highway that I would implore the Attorney General to put a speed camera at, and it is at the Claxton Way turn-off. Not Macaulay, Attorney General, on the flyover itself. And you know, it's really unfortunate, Madam President, because you know everybody knows that that is perhaps the most dangerous bend on the highway. And you will never find police officers monitoring that particular area. And just as it is difficult for you, Madam President, it is difficult for me, because I had an experience where at 4 in the morning, I hit the highway, and at 4 in the morning, hitting the highway, going up the highway one morning, I saw a vehicle, and I saw fire brigades above the flyover, and passing, as I passed, stopped to see what was going on. And it was a vehicle, a B-14, totally in flames, firemen trying to stop it, and everybody's there gathering to see what they can do to help, but nobody could help. And I passed and realized that when I reached my office, sat down, and then got a call that the persons who were burning in there were 3 young individuals. And there were 3 university students on that morning. They were Nicholas Ramdeen, Kyle Saini, and Ryan Ramlagan, 25, 22, and 26. I didn't understand that when I was passing at 4:15 in the morning, I was actually seeing my cousin burning in a vehicle and could do nothing to stop it. Right at Claxton Way, where we all know is so dangerous, and yet still there is nothing there to stop it. You see, Madam President, the Attorney General spoke about the work, administration after administration, that has been built upon to reach where we are today. One of the things that is very disturbing about driving up and down the highway is that the last administration had taken, I thought, and I think we all can think, a progressive step in putting the rails to prevent the highways from vehicles crossing the median. And unfortunately, Madam President, when you drive from San Fernando to Port of Spain every day, you will see that almost all of the barriers are lagging. Where there have been accidents that they are prevented, they are not repaired. And there are large gaping pieces of the highway which have no barriers at all. I don't think any of us here, Madam President, can deny that the putting of those rails are there to protect each and every one of us. They have prevented the loss of life, and they have prevented accidents. And today, as we have this debate upon this speeding, I want to ask the Minister of Works and Transport to please do something about the rails on the highway. Because it's quite clear, Madam President, when you pass, some of those rails just need pulling to be straight again. They don't need, that's all it needs. And one wonders, you just need to have the will to do it. Those 2 accidents that I spoke about, Justice Carlisle Barrett and Justice Kanglu, were accidents that took place because people crossed the median and crashed with people coming from the other direction. And if we can just pull the rails to prevent those accidents from taking place, it is a step in the right direction, just as what we are doing here today, because we're increasing the speed limit to allow people to drive up to 100 kilometers per hour in these areas. And sometimes, like the Attorney General says in the debate downstairs, a car is like a weapon in the hands of a driver. And we sometimes have to guard those drivers from themselves. And whatever steps that we can take to protect all of the drivers on the road, whoever is in government, doesn't matter. it is steps that we must take. So, in addition to the street lights, the cutting of the grass, can we please have the rails on the highways repaired? And where the Minister of Works and Transport is a very progressive minister, and I'm sure that he knows where the areas are. I am sure he drives throughout the country. And therefore, I'm happy to hear that we can, but it might be awarded, but is at risk. All of us are at risk now. Because, Madam President, the most frightening experience is to be driving in one direction and somebody crosses the median and comes in the next direction, because it's just something that you can be the most careful driver to protect yourself, but at the end of the day, you can't drive for everyone else. And almost all of the accidents, the very serious accidents where 2 and 3 people have lost their lives, it is because cars have crossed the median and there is nothing there to protect those cars coming from the opposite direction for errant drivers. So if we can get that done, Madam President, that is a step in the right direction, I think. There's another matter that I want to raise in this debate with the Attorney General, and it is this. Whereas we are concerned about the drivers and we're concerned about the speed limits, when people die on the road, a crime is also committed. And most of these times, when a death occurs on the road, you have an inquest. And Madam President, I'm sure that the Attorney General, in all of the research that he's done about all of the cases in the magistrate courts, the government has taken a progressive approach with respect to the minor offenses and cleaning up the magistrate court with respect to the payments of tickets and with the automated ticketing system, and not having to go to the magistrate court with 20 and 30 matters in every magistrate court every Monday morning and throughout the days to deal with people pleading guilty to traffic offenses. And that is a step in the right direction. But if we look at the other end of the scale, Attorney General, we have hundreds, perhaps, of matters where you have inquests in the magistrate court arising out of motor vehicle accidents where people have lost their lives. And I think all of us know very well, those who practice in the legal profession, that inquests in the magistrate courts takes 10, 11, and 12 years. And that is not justice for those people who have lost the lives of their families. So, can I suggest to you today, Attorney General, that instead of having inquests in every different magisterial district with respect to every loss of life that occurs in every different district, perhaps the time has come for us to amend the Summary Courts Act and provide an inquest court with summary jurisdiction so that it can take control of all of the inquests that arise in all of the motor vehicle accidents that take place. Because over 10 years, the documents will be lost, as you know, the witnesses will die, and what eventually happens in these matters is that they just fall by the wayside and they will eventually be dismissed. And to those families who have lost their loved ones, that cannot be justice by any stretch of the imagination. So it might not arise totally out of this piece of legislation, but it clearly is a suggestion in a step in the right direction where we can provide some kind of relief, no matter how it might be. It might provide relief to the family, but it will also punish those people who are responsible for the deaths of innocent citizens on our roads, who will be innocently driving, doing their daily business, and succumb to a vehicular traffic accident. And at the end of the day, while we are trying to manage road safety in every different way that you can, part of managing road safety is taking off the road people who don't deserve to be on the road in the first place. Now, there's a very peculiar way in which our road traffic management operates, Madam President, with respect to the granting of permission to use our roads. Because all of us here who use vehicles have a driver's license. And the position is that you go once in your lifetime to pass a driving test, where it tests your sight and your ability to know what the traffic laws are. And then for the rest of your life, that's the end of it. So it presumes, in the procedure that we adopt now with respect to our traffic laws, that your sight remains perfect for your entire life. You know what the traffic laws are for your entire life. And you are a good driver as you are at 16 and 17 when you are 70 or 80. And that just defies logic. So you have people who are dangerous not only to other drivers, but to themselves, because over time, their sight is not what it used to be when they passed their driver's permit test. And we have no mechanism in place that reassesses the ability of someone to use our roads by virtue of our motor vehicle and road traffic laws. And that just cannot be right. So, however we devise a mechanism, if we are going to grant driver's licenses for every 10 years or every 15 years, whatever it might be, we have to find a mechanism of reassessing persons' ability to know what the traffic laws are and for us to know whether their ability to continue to be a safe driver on our roads to themselves and to us can be done. And it is something that the Ministry of Works and Transport has to look into, and the licensing division has to look into, because there are people who initially would have been proper persons to put on our roads as drivers, but over time and by loss of their ability of sight and understanding and movement, they would no longer be safe to be on our roads. And none of us would like to deny anyone the ability to use our roads, Madam President. But at the end of the day, this is about the greater good in the public interest for all road users. And if persons cannot see properly, they are dangerous to all of us. And if people cannot maneuver a vehicle properly on the roads, then they don't deserve to be on the roads as a matter of public interest. So today I want to ask again, to ask and to make the suggestion that at the end of the day, we devise some amendment to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act to allow the licensing authority to reassess, perhaps on a 15-year basis. I don't see what the hardship could be every 15 years for someone to go and take over their driving test or go and take over a test to see whether they can see properly in order to, for the greater good, to put people who are properly safe on the roads. Now, that, Madam President, leads to another issue, because I don't think we can overestimate the importance of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to the enforcement of these laws. These laws will only benefit us if at the end of the day they are enforced properly, legally, and fairly. And those persons who are responsible for the enforcement of these laws, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Licensing Authority, they need to get out there and be on the roads. I can tell you, as I stand here, where all the speed traps are on the highway, how could that possibly be right? You slow down before C3, because 6 and 8 in the night, that's where they test on the northbound lane. You slow down before Sriram Brothers, because that's the place that they test. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You slow down before Price Mart going east, because that's where they test. I mean, we cannot really conceivably be right-thinking citizens running our country to think that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service will just go and have spot tests in the same place every day at the same hours and expect that that is the enforcement of speed limits in this country. And whereas recently we have to be very careful about giving the police instructions, and I mean, the National Security Council, the police accounts to the National Security Council for what they do. And if we know that that is the position, some serious questions have to be asked about whether it be the divisional heads.
5 more
Thank you, Madam
minutes.
President. Or anyone else who is responsible for the operations of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And in another debate, I think it was when the Attorney General brought the first set of amendments to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, the host of them. In that debate, I stood here and I showed you that there's a WhatsApp message that goes out telling people when the police have roadblocks, when they have speed checks, and where they are going to have it. And any police officer who is engaged in that is clearly misbehaving in public office. And when have we heard, just as we want to enforce the laws, Madam President, with respect to speeding, we must enforce the laws with respect to people who are breaking the laws, not only on the roads, but those people who are causing us the carnage on the roads by their own misbehavior. And where that stone falls in the garden of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, those that are responsible for disciplining those officers must do it. And that is where we are falling short, not only in road safety, in every aspect of our national security. And I'm not apologizing for saying so, because the problem we have will never be solved unless you root out the real problems in the system. So today, Madam President, Madam President, just imagine, there's an article here that is pulled out from February 25th, 2016, where a police officer is charged with DUI. I mean, what kind of example is that are we setting? Where the people who are responsible for enforcing the breathalyzer are being charged with drunk driving, driving under the influence. So, as with every other piece of legislation that we pass, we can discharge our duty here as a parliament to the people of Trinidad and Tobago by passing good law that is supported by all sides, both in the other place and here. But that law is going to amount to nothing, Madam President, if we don't get hold of the people who are responsible for the enforcement of this law. This might be a simple piece of legislation that is only 2 clauses, but it's a very far-reaching piece of legislation with respect to exactly what we are trying to achieve, which is to change our behavior and our behavioral patterns so that we can live together in a society that is safe and secure for all of us. Motor vehicles are a means to get from point A to point B. Through development and technology, they're a fascinating piece of machinery. But like the Attorney General has said before, I will join him and say, they can be a dangerous weapon in the hands of the wrong people. And we have lost too many people, too many lives, too many children, too many mothers, and too many fathers to road deaths on the roads. And we must do something to stop it. I hope that those responsible for the enforcement of this piece of legislation will do so in a proper manner, in a dutiful manner, in a fair manner, and in a manner that accords with the law. And if that is done, Madam President, all of us in every part of Trinidad and Tobago will benefit. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Richards.
Madam President, I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this bill, which is an amendment to the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Act. I want to give thanks to my bench coordinator and colleagues for me giving the opportunity to open batting, as it were, from the independent bench position. It may seem, as many have indicated, as a simple amendment, but I don't see it as that at all. I see it as something quite significant because of the implications for raising or lowering speed limits because of public safety issues. The AG indicated that the original act is 83 years old with 95 amendments so far, and it is much more than just lowering or raising a speed limit. If you look at it, to me, in a comprehensive manner, it has implications, if you look at it holistically, for road safety, public safety, for productivity, for national security, because the use of the roads, as we saw, unfortunately, last week, with the Beetham incident, have significant implications for public safety and national security and the conduit for citizens and visitors alike. It has implications for quality of life, mental well-being, physical well-being, because of the number of hours we spend and our children spend on a daily basis commuting to and from school and work. It has implications for investment in Trinidad and Tobago and business sustainability. It has implications for environmental protection and national development. So I really don't see it as simply as some others may see it. And I would take 2 different approaches in what I hope will not be a particularly long contribution to this debate. I want to start by looking at the issue of speed. And it may seem a bit academic, but I always like the grounding in some sort of empiricism. And according to the OECD, 2006, speed encompasses really a suggestion of excessive speeding, driving above or below the speed limit, because driving below the speed limit in jurisdictions also has implications for road safety and can cause accidents and fatalities. You know, it is classified as inappropriate speed, driving too fast or too slow for the conditions in that particular location, because different locations have different implications for the speed one must traverse with. Speed has been identified as a key risk factor in road injuries, influencing both the risk of road traffic crashes and the severity of injuries at any particular point in any particular road incident. Higher speeds generally lead to greater risks of crashes and greater probability of serious injury and the severity of those injuries. That is because as speed increases, and this has been studied over and over, so does the distance traveled in a particular time. So the driver's reaction time and distance that's needed to stop. And also the errors of driver error is amplified in a direct correlation with the increase in speed. So speed is a very, very significant issue. Very often also, driving below a speed limit or below at a lower than appropriate speed has implications because it leads to frustrations, traffic jams, and people reacting in instances of road rage, as we've seen in many instances in Trinidad and Tobago and in other jurisdictions. There are many studies that provide direct evidence that speeds just 5 kilometers above average and the Honorable AG indicated in Trinidad and Tobago, we classify it as built-up areas and not built-up areas. In most other jurisdictions, it's classified as urban or rural in terms of the application of the speed limits. Speeds of just 5 kilometers above average in 60-kilometer urban areas and 10 above average can double the risk of casualty and fatalities, just like there's a correlation between blood alcohol level in many of these jurisdictions. And the research in the US have focused on the effect of changes in speed limits and death on rural interstate highways. The factors affecting speed limit choices in any jurisdiction, Madam President, and the safety of road users include speed measurements, as Senator Ramdeen focused a lot on the operationalization of speed limits, which is critical in any jurisdiction. The measurement of traffic flow, traffic volume, the appropriate use of speed to monitor traffic volume, traffic crash data, information from the police on speeding offenses, the design, speed design and criteria used to build or rehabilitate a road, because quality of roads is also very important. And I'm glad that the Honourable Minister of Works has indicated that there is some sort of audit going on in terms of the number of roads and the quality of roads we have in Trinidad and Tobago, because you can have, and this particular bill seeks to, as the AG indicated, relax, as it were, the speed limit on the highway. But if the roads are of a poor quality, there are potholes, and there are dangerous intersections, this may serve to the detriment of road users. And in other jurisdictions, we find that there is a lot of emphasis placed on concentrations of accidents in particular areas, the crossing interchange. I'm surprised that that has not been rehabilitated or re-engineered after the number of crashes and fatalities we've seen at that area. Senator Ramdeen just spoke about the curve on the highway. We all know how dangerous that is. In Germany in particular, that is one of the main bits of research that goes into finding a way to reduce road fatalities, in terms of if there's found to be a high concentration of fatalities at a particular point. That entire stretch is re-engineered. The data points to that, because there must be a reason that 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 persons have died there. It means it's a difficult point to navigate. And so the state must take some sort of preemptive measure and change the circumstances of that area. And when we're thinking in the context of speed and increasing or relaxing speed limits or reducing speed limits in those particular areas, those sorts of considerations must also take precedent. The issue of land characteristics and properties adjoining these roads and the amount of population density around particular areas is also a very significant factor that must be considered when you think of speed in any particular area or location, because when you have a high population density, it means you have a higher probability of persons using that road, and there's such a higher possibility of accidents. And so that must also be a significant consideration when you're thinking of raising or lowering speed limits. And also the issue of distractions in a particular area. And there's a circumstance in Trinidad and Tobago, as we consider speed and speed limits, of an increasing preponderance of huge LED billboards at significant intersections, posing major distractions. And that has gone unregulated. There are now concentrations around major intersections because of the location is high visibility, and the business plan is high visibility means more money that you can spend. There's one, Madam President, right, not too far from this August chamber, on Royston Road when you're coming off South Key onto Royston Road. And I don't know how permission could be granted to put a huge LED billboard just akin to a traffic light. Because I will tell you, on many occasions, if you're driving in the night and coming onto Royston Road, depending on the color and the luminescence of that LED, it obscures the traffic light totally. So you don't know whether it's a red light or a green light. That poses a significant danger. So when we're talking about speed limits and road usage, we must also consider these other issues that pose dangers to commuters and pedestrians alike. Public awareness. Very often we see in other jurisdictions when there is a move to reduce or increase speed limit, you see a huge campaign on billboards. 3 months, speed limit changing. 2 months, speed limit is changing. On a billboard, a specially designed billboard in the area, media bursts to make sure the public is properly sensitized as to these changes and their responsibility in terms of the legal aspects of it. And we don't seem to be going through those processes when we amending the laws in Trinidad and Tobago. And I consider that due diligence on our part in terms of making sure that when we make changes like this, the public is made aware. The Honorable AG had made a point, and rightly so, a short while ago, because very often we're discussing issues in this Honorable House. And many of my colleagues in the media may jump out and edit, or not intentionally, put part of it out, and we know easily misinformation pervades in Trinidad and Tobago. Or they're debating it in the House. Next week, there's a perception, well, it's a done deal, because it has been passed in the Senate, even though it has not been assented to, and the mechanisms put in place. So we also need public awareness programs to make this more effectively, because we're talking about public safety issues when you're talking about lowering and raising speed limits in Trinidad and Tobago. Speed limits also have the implication for traffic management and speed management. The benefits of lowered speed or amended speeds include greater time to recognize hazards, because there are pros and cons in any argument in terms of raising or lowering speed limits. Reduced distance travel while reacting to hazards, reduced stopping distance, increased ability of other road users to judge vehicle speed before collision, greater opportunities for other road users to avoid collisions. And if I may make a suggestion through you, Madam President, to the Honourable Attorney General, I know, and I agree with it, and it was underscored by Senator Ramdeen, that we can't change all of the laws at once. The measured approach is the more productive approach. But when we're doing amendments like this, we may want to consider parallel amendments, such as lane assignments for extremely heavy vehicles, because the speed limit alone by itself may not provide the sort of safety mechanism that we envision when we think of the fact that any of us who are users of the road, and drivers in particular, will see heavy trucks and the heavy-duty vehicles, the chemical transporters, lumber vehicles swerving in and out of all the lanes of the highways. we may want to consider, as some other jurisdictions have done, limiting the times where these sorts of heavy-duty vehicles and transport vehicles use the roads to more low-peak times to protect road users. These are the sorts of considerations I think we need to ensure that we give due consideration to, because these are the kinds of things where, one, ease of the traffic and also provide a greater safety blanket to road users, because we all know when you're driving behind or astride of one of those huge vehicles, you really don't know what's happening, and if that driver doesn't see you, one false move could mean disaster for many people on using the roads. You know, one of the interesting studies that I was able to put my hands on is a New Zealand study, which focused on a lot of issues related to road safety and the fact that when they did their comprehensive research study, which was the foundation for the changes in their laws, they had an interesting phenomenon. There was a fuel crisis in 1973, and the New Zealand government reduced the rural speed limits from 55 kilometers to 50 kilometers to reduce the amount of fuel being used. That's what some of these countries think, because lower speeds mean less fuel is used. And there was a 37% drop in serious injuries in urban roads and a 24% drop in rural roads, just as a consequence of that, a secondary consequence of lowering the speed limit because of the fuel crisis. It's not always applicable, and I know we're talking about relaxing the speed limit on the highway, but we also need to look at the whole picture when we're talking about raising or lowering speed limits. There's a checklist that came out of that study in terms of determining what should be considered when raising or lowering speed limits or changing laws that relate to road use in general. What are the current laws and regulations that relate to road safety, and how effectively are they being applied by law enforcement? Because if they're not being applied, as been underscored by Senator Ramdeen and others when we debated transport bill in the last session, we realized that is a challenge in Trinidad and Tobago. We started off hot and sweaty with seatbelts 10 or so years ago. The first 3 months, lots of charges and tickets given out. 6 months, we knew it's going to be relaxed. We started off with the cell phone bill, lots of tickets given out in the first 3 months. The road users know it's going to be intensified for 3 months, and then it falls apart. And that has been our history in terms of the enforcement of laws in Trinidad and Tobago. And as Senator Ramdeen indicated, Trinidadians and Tobagonians are so tech savvy now. Before, you didn't have Waze. You turn on your Waze on your phone now, and it tells you where every police stop is. It tells you whether there's a speed gun being enforced, even before you leave your office. It tells you where the traffic buildup is, and it has implications for how the police apply the laws. You cannot end up in the same spot the same time for a consistent number of days. You have to be more strategic than that. And you're battling technology, which is giving not only errant road users, but the criminal element advantages in ways they never had before. And the laws and the legislative amendments must take these into consideration. The other considerations are the highways design standards in concert with these new speed limits. Because as speed limits are changed in developed countries, so too, as I said before, are the designs and the reconstruction of these highways and roadways to accommodate increases or decreases in speed limits. To whom does the law apply? Is it to all vehicle users? All classes of vehicles? Are there variations, perhaps for heavy T, learners, cycle lanes? Does the law apply to all types of roads? How are the limits signed and applied? And what are the penalties for not complying to the law? All these are considerations, Madam President, we have to also factor in. And I know there was quite a bit of commendation for the technocrats in the Ministry of Works and Transport, and rightly so. And might I have my own commendations, because I keep hearing great reports about, well, I know about St. James and licensing office, but the Motor Vehicle Authority and the efficiency over and over. I'm hearing it seeing it on social media and also in electronic media about the efficiencies that are now becoming part of the normal course in Trinidad and Tobago. I think that needs to be commended, because we're always talking down about public servant, but when we see good, we're supposed to say good is happening, right? There are also factors that we need to consider when setting or changing speed limits, including crash history, as I said before, road shoulder width and pavement quality, the road delineation, the edge and centerline marking, reflectors, guideposts, edge of shoulders, and how effective signage is and the maintenance of signage. Because we are not particularly great at signage in Trinidad and Tobago, or the maintenance of signage. Lane widths should be adequate, at least 2 to 3 lanes within a minimum width of 3 to 4 meters in this particular New Zealand jurisdiction. Narrow lane widths offer little margin of error, and therefore speed limits must not exceed that required by drivers to heat consistently within that lane. You know, I always tell this story, Madam President, of culture shock in Germany 2006 when we went to support our Soca Warriors. And the fact that we are, and I take no pleasure in saying this, we are somewhat of a lawless society. So going to Germany and seeing people following the law was culture shock to Trinbagonians. We were amazed that train tracks and roadways were not separated by barriers, and no one was running into trains. That can't happen in Trinidad and Tobago. At this stage, anyway, I have hope for the future. And the fact we must understand our culture when we are implementing changes to laws and trying to apply them effectively, because we have to know ourselves to know what will be effective and what won't be effective. Land developments must be factored in when increasing or decreasing speed limits. It must be in concert with the overall national plan for development, because if we know we have huge population densities and developments in particular areas, that is going to lead in many cases to increased traffic flows. So the dynamics of road use are going to change in those areas. So if we're not factoring those developments, for example, we have this C3 complex now down in South Trinidad, and we all know there has been a dynamic shift because of the number of people that is going to frequent that area. And we must make those considerations when we're doing the traffic amendments or the road management amendments in those areas, inclusive of speed limits. We also have to look at the types of intersections which are of critical nature, and the use of roundabouts, which is one of the most effective traffic management and speed management mechanisms used around the world, because you have, if you know there's a roundabout, generally, subconsciously, you have to slow down to make a type of navigation around the roundabout. And they're used very effectively in terms of managing speeds and traffic flow in various jurisdictions. Also, the volume and flow of traffic, which is kind of self-explanatory, and the ability to safely overtake given increases in speed. Because increases in speed or decreases in speed limits also have implications for navigation and acceleration, deceleration, and overtaking. So there are a lot of considerations. It may seem like a simple amendment, but it really is not when you're thinking in the context of public safety and road safety and the number of fatalities we've seen in Trinidad and Tobago. I've been able to come upon some research in terms of the disparities in rural limits and urban limits, as the Honorable AG indicated. We classify them as built-up areas and not built-up areas. In Argentina, rural limit, 80 to 100 kilometers. Urban limit, 40 to 60 kilometers. In Kerala, India, 70 kilometers. In rural, 40 kilometers per hour. In Uttar Pradesh, India, rural and urban, no limit. In Ghana, rural limit 90 kilometers, urban limit 50 kilometers. Indonesia, rural limit 80 to 100 kilometers, urban limit 40 to 60 kilometers. Malaysia, 90 kilometers, rural, and in urban 50 kilometers. So generally, we're within the range of what is being applied in many other jurisdictions. And as a general rule of thumb, in developing and high-income countries, urban roads, which is city center roads or densely populated areas, have limits of between 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. and main highways or rural roads 70 to 100 kilometers per hour, and motorways or high-speed highways 90 to 130 kilometers per hour. But those very high-speed highways also have many safety mechanisms built in. So they just don't raise or allow huge speed limits. They put a lot of safety mechanisms in place to make sure that public safety is maintained and fatalities are curtailed as much as possible. And the general stakeholder groupings in terms of speed management in any jurisdiction, and I know we probably have a few of these covered here: political and government leaders, finance authorities, road authorities, licensing authorities, road authorities, local, police, ambulance and emergency hospital, education department, health department, community leaders, the media, research institutions, employers and transport industry experts, motoring association, NGOs, road safety community groups, insurance sector, and vehicle manufacturers. So I think we have basically most of those covered. Madam President, the other aspect of this speed issue that I think to look at the more holistic approach to me is along the issue of productivity. And road speed use and traffic management have direct implications of productivity in any jurisdiction because of the importance of road networks in getting goods and services and people from one place to the other. I looked at a report of Eddington R 2006. It's a case study with the Eddington Transport Authority. And in terms of productivity, I'm reading this interesting book. I thought I'd share this because of where we are in Trinidad and Tobago and the challenges that face us. Alan Greenspan advised 5 different presidents on economic policy in the U.S. And in my last presentation, and I think the last 3, I focused a lot on productivity. And I don't think this speed limit or traffic management is any different in terms of national development. And productivity is, again, at the center of this, because when you think of road use and speeds lowering or increases of speeds, we also have to think of productivity in terms of goods and services. And Mr. Greenspan indicated productivity is arguably the most central measure of the material success of any economy. The level of productivity ultimately determines the average standard of living and is a defining characteristic that separates the so-called developed world from the developing world. And innovation is a critical determinant of productivity rate of growth and reflects how quickly new ideas are effectively implemented and absorbed into the production process. And I think when we're thinking of the larger context of traffic management and road use in Trinidad and Tobago, we really have to think of it in terms of how these changes affect productivity levels in Trinidad and Tobago. And that, to me, has not really been focused on enough. And Eddington comments that transportation networks and roadways play a critical role in economic development, but the historical and macroeconomic evidence only take us so far. Good measurement of transport effects on the economy is of fundamental importance. The different mechanisms that underpin the relationships between transport, road use, and growth has been discussed at length in many studies. The studies all sought to develop an understanding of those mechanisms which impact on GDP, and transportation and road efficiency is a significant contributor. There's a SACTRA report, 1999, which focused on the mechanisms by which transportation and road use improvements could, in principle, improve economic performance in any jurisdiction. When we're talking about lowering and raising of speed limits, we also have to factor in the fact that we can, through these mechanisms of traffic flow management and traffic management in general, look at how we can deal with the deficiencies in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of productivity. Proper traffic management focuses on the reorganization and rationalization of production, distribution, and land use, the effects in labor market, catchment areas, and labor costs, increases in output resulting from a lower cost of production and transportation of goods and services, the stimulation of inward investment in the jurisdiction, the unlocking of previously inaccessible sites for development, and the triggering of growth, which in turn stimulates further growth in any particular jurisdiction. So I think when we're looking at the use of roads and traffic management in Trinidad and Tobago, and we know we have a challenge with that in Trinidad and Tobago. We have too many cars, not an effective public transportation system, and so gridlocks and national security risks as a result of gridlocks, because we've seen last week in the Beetham and when we had the prison break a couple of years ago. What resulted from that? Panic, gridlock, public safety issues, national anxiety. So we need to find more efficient ways of managing traffic flow in and out of the urban centers, Port of Spain, San Fernando, and the areas that are showing significant growth like Chaguanas, Couva, Point Lisas, and Arima, and also parts of Tobago. More efficiency, Madam President, in terms of road usage can result in increased business investment and innovation, supporting clusters, improving efficient functioning of labor markets, and increasing competition and also opportunities for foreign direct investment in any jurisdiction because they see that the productivity levels are rising because we have more efficient movement of goods and services in that particular area. One of the areas that I'd like to focus a little on, which is related, is, for example, our public transportation system, PTSC. And the fact that we've seemingly accepted that, well, everybody has to get a car because we have a poorly functioning public transportation system. Why can't we look at PTSC as something we can revolutionize, innovate? What are the real issues with PTSC? Why do we have clogs in the roads? Because we don't have confidence. We don't think public transportation is reliable, is efficient, is dependable, and it also just takes us to main areas and doesn't go the next leg, as we see in developed countries, and do free transfers to final destinations. Why can't we take a better strategic look at PTSC in terms of how it's functioning and how we can innovate and rehabilitate and re-engineer PTSC to a more efficient service, which has implications for traffic, road use, and speed levels in Trinidad and Tobago? Why can't PTSC provide transportation between the main areas and work some sort of strategic alliance with either maxis or smaller buses between final destinations in villages to pick up people and make it more efficient? It has implications for transportation cost, fuel economy, subsidy reduction, safety of passenger travel, less traffic on the road, and a host of other value added. But we're not looking in that direction. Why can't PTSC look at Port of Spain hub, San Fernando hub, Arima, Chaguanas as areas of commerce with libraries, restaurants, information centers, bill pay centers because of the volume of traffic, and turn them into these wonderful areas where people feel proud to go through, even in the absence of a multi-billion-dollar rail plan? Why can't we look at Port of Spain, which has a wonderful, beautiful, original edifice, and break down the unfortunate addition? I don't want to use the unparliamentary term to describe it, but turn it into a hub that we're all proud of, that can also generate money in terms of rental and use in so many different areas for commuters alike in Trinidad and Tobago. Why aren't we thinking? And so too for San Fernando and Arima and Chaguanas. That has implications for all our lives and the quality of lives, because we will then say, this is something I want to use. Even if I have a vehicle, I don't have to, because a small bus will pick me up inside my village or town, take me to the main center, because we don't have the land space for the parking areas that we see in other jurisdictions. I get a free transfer from that to the main area into Port of Spain, the main bus into Port of Spain, and then I get a final destination leg again, as we use in other jurisdictions, free transfers. Why is PTSC not thinking beyond what they are now? Because we accepted the incompetence, we accepted what it is, and then it can turn into a contributor to GDP in Trinidad and Tobago. We've seen turnarounds with TT Post and other agencies. Why can't we do that with PTSC? Because of the significant impact travel gridlock has on Trinidad and Tobago. This is one of my humble suggestions in terms of us moving forward when we're looking holistically at traffic road management in Trinidad and Tobago. As Senator Ramdeen indicated, this move, because of its impact on not only my life but all our lives, is one that is almost a no-brainer. It's a fait accompli. It will get my support because of its implications for the quality of lives in Trinidad and Tobago. We all looked on at people when the limit was imposed a couple of months ago driving up the highway slowly, hoping that the police are not out, waiting till 7 o'clock when you know the police are more than likely going in to get to our destinations, which is really breaking the law, which is not encouraging. We know it's not, as it currently stands, realistic and practical. But to me, we have to take a much bigger look, a much more holistic look at how our national traffic plan, or national traffic management plan and road safety plan ties into national development. And I'm not really seeing that. And I know we can't, as the Honorable AG said, we can't do it all in one go. But we certainly need to start to think in that direction, because very often we are constantly playing catch up with our laws and our amendments to laws in Trinidad and Tobago, as opposed to passing laws and making amendments that put us 20 years down the road because of where we know we want to be and what we want Trinidad and Tobago to become to help us out of where we are now in terms of our economic challenges. Overall transportation policy purposes must have long-term, medium-term, and short-term objectives, Madam President. Long-term objectives include effective movement of people, freight, where they need to go in a timely manner, efficient delivery of right infrastructure and services to the right level at the best cost, resilient, which means it meets the future transportation needs and endures shocks in the system. For example, what we saw in the Betham, our road traffic plan must have contingencies to deal with that, so that if that sort of activity, God forbid, happens again, we have a plan B and a plan C that kicks in one time. You know, I was, Madam President, in shock to hear an admission from the acting police commissioner that, well, his men had a gap in the operation. A gap? This is not the first, second, or third time we've had eruptions in that area. And there's no playbook in place now to deal with that. That gap could have resulted in the loss of lives. One of my best friends, Nikki Crosby, was caught in that, and several other women and children.
Senator Richards, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. So we need to be thinking more holistically about these things. We can't wait for the next one to happen, and we certainly can't simply accept, well, the officers had a gap in the operations at this stage in the game, knowing the kind of situation that admonished Trinidad and Tobago. What happens next time? We'll accept the gap again? Madam President, in closing, I just want to underscore that very often we look at these sorts of amendments and we are in agreement with them, but we really need to find ways, because I know I'm almost certain, not speaking for anyone else, but an agreement that this is a good move in terms of the suggestion by the Honorable Attorney General. But I just want us to, as we move forward, take a more holistic look and look at more variables in terms of the amendments and what we could have added to this to make life and quality of life and efficiency and productivity issues be reduced or be improved just that much more in Trinidad and Tobago, because it is never one moving part, as any government or opposition understands. You're juggling a multiplicity of variables at any one time, and the more we get done now, the more proactive we are, the more forward-thinking we are, the less we'd have to deal with, and the more we can move our country forward to make sure that we secure a future for generations to come. Madam President, I thank you.
Minister of Works and Transport.
Madam President, I'm grateful for the privilege to present today in the Honorable House with specific responsibility for traffic management and the enforcement of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. Madam President, the Ministry of Works and Transport views very seriously road safety. It is one of our highest priority. And Madam President, I am really happy today to listen to the Attorney General deliver my speech. However, Madam President, this bill poses 2 simple measures: the amendment of Section 627 of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act and the amendment of the second schedule of the said Act. In the first instance, Clause 2A seeks to amend Section 627 by removing the need to amend the second schedule of the Act by affirmative resolution of the Parliament and substituting a practical process by empowering the Minister to amend the second schedule by order subject to a negative resolution of the Parliament. In other words, Madam President, this amendment would simplify the process in which the law will be amended in the future. This approach is consistent with other Commonwealth jurisdictions. Secondly, Clause 2B seeks to amend the second schedule of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act by introducing new speed limits for specific classes of motor vehicle. And it is for this simple reason we came here to this debate to increase the speed limit from 80 kilometers per hour to 100 kilometers only on the major highways in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, over the past years, our roads have become safer. Statistics from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service indicate that since the introduction of the speed guns to the regime of the traffic control, many motorists have been prosecuted for breaking the existing speed limits. This new ability to more closely police driving speeds, combined with the public's request to update the current speed limit, first enforced in 1969, has resulted in the bill here today. Madam President, just going back to my speech, I would just like to correct one thing the Attorney General said is the highways are built for a speed of 110, not 125 miles per hour. Sorry, kilometers per hour. Kilometers is a big difference, so I don't want the public to think it's 100 miles. 100 kilometers is significantly less than 100 miles. Madam President, I just want to go back to the beginning of Senator Ramdeen, and I am happy that Senator Ramdeen agreed with the bill. I sat in the other place where the first debate took place, and I think all members on the opposition supported the bill. And it's a nice, it sends the right signal that when you do something properly, everybody supports it. And I want to compliment you, Senator Ramdeen. I also agree that one life lost on the road is one life too much. And this country has seen a significant reduction in the amount of road fatalities, and we are on course to achieve that 50% reduction that we have given ourselves. We are down, I think it's 8% over last year. So this year we should be able to achieve the goals that we would have set, and we should reach that by in the time that we have given ourselves to achieve that. Arrive Alive, I have spoken to them, I have worked with them, and they have given us their, well, I wouldn't say their blessings on this. They have given us a lot of ideas and certain areas that they want to see corrected. And we have given them the assurance that before the speed limit is in place, that we will take all those considerations and have most of them addressed. We are also, and I'm speaking to the Attorney General, where there's a fund to be operationalized for the victims of road accidents, which have been in place for quite a while but have not been operationalized. And I am speaking to the Attorney General so that some of the victims that you spoke about, especially the 2 orphans, that we can find a way for victims like that to access the fund. You also spoke about the speed guns. We are up to 15 speed guns now. And you rightly said the onus of where they use them is to the TTPS. I don't think the Ministry of Works could direct the police where they should put their speed traps and so. But one area that will complement those speed guns, we are in the process of installing, well, once we have 4 pilot projects now, the spot speed cameras. We have one in Trin City, then we have in the Arangwes area, and we have 2 going up, I think, on the Solomon Hulchoy very soon. Now, it's a pilot project. Once the legislation is passed, we have these speed guns. I can give you some of the locations and I think one of the locations is the area that you had the concern with. But we will have in 3 phases, almost 30 spot speed cameras and the red light cameras throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And if we have those spot speed and 15 handheld, I don't see why the TTPS can't use some of them in areas that may not be considered as highways, but in the more rural areas where we do have traffic accidents. You spoke about the cable barriers. I have spoken to the permanent secretary, and we are addressing the cable barriers. The cable barriers are not as simple as you said, just to pull. There's the contractor who supplied them also has the contract for the repairs. It is a very, very expensive piece of equipment. It is not as simple as just pulling the cables. It has to go with a span and everything. We have spoken to the contractor. The permanent secretary told me that very soon they have actually reached new negotiations, and the contractor will be working on it to get them back up to standard.
Honourable Senators, at this juncture, we will suspend for half an hour and we will resume at 5 p.m. Minister, you've used 8 minutes of your speaking time. So we are suspended until 5 p.m.